F sharp, A sharp, revisited. And that's why I think a Yes tribute band should be called Yep rather than Yus.
Yes, I think that's an incredibly compelling argument, and I wholeheartedly agree. Hello, everyone, and welcome to F Sharp A Sharp Revisited, the music review podcast where we impart our thoughts on what's new in music. I am Joe, the music critic supervillain, and I'm a bit drugged up today on aspirin and Lemsip, which is a great combination. And with me, as always, is a good kid in a mad city, Nick. You like that one, don't you?
I do like that one.
And let's just jump straight into the first item.
Do we have to?
Yeah, I'm actually really excited to talk about this song. Look What You Made Me Do by Taylor Swift. Which
I just don't think we should be giving her any more attention than she already has.
I mean, she has received a lot of attention, but honestly, I think this song has revolutionized minimalist pop. I think it's utterly fantastic. I think it's brilliant the way she orchestrates her depth of character around bare-bones structure, resulting in a strikingly passionate and forthright expression that stands bold. I can't do this, it's terrible.
I was going to say, by that, do you mean the chorus is absolutely abysmal, incredibly boring, the pre-chorus is super generic?
Yeah.
Yeah.
By all of that, I meant it's terrible, and people will make up any kind of justification for it, like I do sometimes just for the fun of it, but yeah.
Just...
It's pretty bad.
Look What You Made Me Do is the worst reinvention of Taylor that Taylor could ever have come up with.
Well, I suppose it is a reinvention, but like I've never liked Taylor Swift because I've always found her to be very egocentric, very kind of petty. She always comes across as petty and spoiled, and that comes across so much in the song when she's like, I don't like this about you, don't like that about you, don't like you. It's she just comes across as just so juvenile. It's pretty pathetic.
I mean, if I had to say something, I'd say some of there's some interesting beats in the verse, but nothing really special. It stops it from being, absolutely dreadful. But here's the thing: this trailer is meant to be an attack track against Katy Perry and to a lesser extent Kanye West. Because, as we know, your favourite song of the year so far is Swish Swish by Katy Perry. And on that, she made some digs at Taylor Swift. Yeah. So now Taylor Swift is digging at Katy Perry. And I don't understand how she clearly seems to think that the best way to beat Katy is to contend with her for worst track of the year. I mean, she even alludes to Swish Swish in this song.
Yeah.
And this is just such a stupid feud between the two people, and it makes me think back to the mid-2000s when the film Alien vs Predator came out. Now, that film was a train wreck. It was absolutely terrible, but what I remember about it is that the tagline was, whoever wins, we lose. And that's exactly what's happening here.
Yeah, it's like everyone on Twitter, of course, is either Team Tay-Tay or Team Katy, and I'm just like, team, throw them both in the gulag, to be honest. Not gonna lie.
She seems to think this is the style that is exactly what she needs to prove she's serious, strong, independent against Kenny and Katy. It's just impossible to take her seriously.
No, you really can't. And I just wanted to talk about something that really annoys me about this song, and it probably annoys me more than most other people just because it's part of my character, but something I really don't like is just when people don't take responsibility for their own actions. And so a chorus that's literally, oh, look what you made me do, over and over and over again, really irritates me, like, a lot.
And of all the places she could have taken it from, she took it from I'm Too Sexy by Right Said Fred.
Yeah.
They have a production credit on this. Like, that screams serious, doesn't it?
It's beyond belief.
This is the most super-duper edgy song.
Well, yeah, that's just it. It's like in the bridge as well. I don't trust nobody and nobody trusts me. It's like she's trying to come across as edgy, but all she's doing is confirming that she has a terrible personality and no one likes her. And just another note on the instrumentation, I talked about it being a bit minimalist, which it is, but that only ever really serves to highlight the lyrics, which are not good at all.
They're dreadful.
So, yeah, the song is terrible.
Oh, look what you made me do. Look what you made me do. Look what you just made me do. I gave you a bad review. Look what you made me do. Look what you made me do. Your music is so cringe I sawed my ears off with a shoe. I don't trust nobody and nobody trusts me. Because I have such a terrible personality. I don't trust nobody and nobody trusts me. My melodrama borders on insanity. Hi Taylor, you alright to speak for a minute?
I'm sorry, the old Taylor can't come to the phone right now.
What are you talking about? I just wanted to...
Why? Oh, 'cause she's dead.
This is the third time this week you've used that excuse to avoid this notary meeting. It's going to happen. She hung up on me. Every single time.
Well, I think we should stop talking about one terrible song and move on to another.
Just one last
okay.
point. YouTube, I've got a bone to pick with you. The first 3 times I went onto the video for Look What You Made Me Do, I found my dislike completely vanished. So yeah, I'm not happy about that. I think that's a bit shady.
Protecting Taylor. I will say that my dislike hasn't disappeared. It stayed there.
After the 4th one, it didn't disappear for me, but I think then that's when all the damage limitation had been done. I think if they'd kept all the dislikes, the dislike ratio would be much higher than what it is now. It's kind of like a 10% dislike at the moment.
Well, that wasn't even apparently her first single. Apparently her first actual single for it is Ready For It, which was released, I think, a couple of weeks later. And this one sounds a bit more like it could have belonged on 1989, which I guess is good because I want to keep as far away from Look What You Made Me Do as possible. But it's just like she took every single possible pop and trap cliche and just made them into a song.
Yeah, I found myself very nonplussed by Ready For It. Just the instrumentation. I suppose it's a bit of a change in direction for her as a musician, but I don't think she executes it particularly well at all.
It's really unlikable, formulaic trash.
Yeah, I'll have to say I wasn't so offended by this track. Just nothing about it really appealed to me.
I just really disliked listening to it. It's got this really heavy, lumbering beat, which isn't the opening bass is so obnoxious.
Yeah.
The drum beat is like the most generic trap beat you could possibly come up, and that post-chorus with all its bombast, it's so bombastic it made me laugh and kind of cry a bit at the same time.
It's like minimalist bombast as well. I think that's kind of like a theme she might be going for with this new album.
I just want her to stop.
I want all of them to stop. Taylor Swift, Katy Perry, all of them. One thing I will say about Ready For It, actually it's not a positive thing. Basically, it's a very basic Taylor Swift love song lyrically. It's nothing she hasn't written before.
Yeah.
So that's that.
But then again, do you really think Taylor's going to come up with anything new at this point?
No, not really. Not really. She'll keep treading the kind of modernish pop sound for the time being.
Classic Taylor. Well, let's move on to something which isn't Taylor Swift.
Yeah, something that's at least good.
Well, that's debatable.
Oh, here we go. Here we go.
A few years have passed since Queen of the Stone Age have released their last album, which was Like Clockwork, which to me I think is their best album personally. So they've got a new one out this year called Villains.
Yep.
And we actually talked about one of the tracks from this album.
The Way You Used to Do.
Yeah, The Way You Used to Do. And I think we both agreed that it was a decent track, but it left a bit to be desired.
Pretty much, yeah.
One of my main problems with that track was the mixing.
I
really hated how the guitars sounded like, Donald Duck.
Yeah, they sounded squelchy.
Yeah, and the drums sound like they were being hit by pom-poms. Unfortunately, that seems to have continued onto most of the other songs on the album. I remember when I first turned it on, listened to the first track, Feet Don't Fail Me, got past that really long intro.
It's very long.
It is a very long intro. I'm not sure how necessary it is either. And then that really squelchy, really...
Bum, 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 bum. It's basically just like that.
It's annoying because I think that's possibly one of the better songs on the album.
See, I thought it was the worst.
It takes so long to get into, and it's so impossible to take seriously with that guitar.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think for a start there are any songs on the album that particularly stick in my mind. Like when I think back to Like Clockwork, there's If I Had Tail and My God Is the Sun, which are really both quite catchy considering they're not really catchy songs and very memorable. Whereas on this album, it's all just sort of passed me by.
There is one track on this album though that I think is one of my favourites of last month. Really,
go on.
The closing track, Villains of Circumstance. I really liked that track a lot. Really liked the change in time signature. One thing about this album that it never really clicked with me before, Josh Homme's vocals, I love them.
Oh yeah,
I think
he's
they're
the best
brilliant.
thing about the album.
His vocals are amazing. He has such a great control over his vibratos that on the more melancholic songs like Unreborn Again and Villains of Circumstance, he really draws out the emotion of those tracks, and it's really nice to listen to.
And I think to accompany that, the lyrics for the most part are pretty good on this album. Not as good as they have been in the past. They lack the wit and immediacy that I've heard from him before. But I think twinned with his vocals, he can make most things work.
Pretty much. I mean, there are only kind of a few lyrical slip-ups. I mean, on Feet Don't Fail Me Now, lines like "Me and my gang come to bust you loose. We move with an urgency" just seems a little bit,
I thought
a little bit trite to me.
That track possibly had. Well, I thought the lyrics seemed quite unfocused in that. There seemed to be a lot of topics he wanted to cover and couldn't really find a way of stringing them all together.
Yeah.
Which is a bit disappointing.
Yeah. But in terms of the album, I thought the second half was really strong. The first half I could pretty much take or leave, but the second half I really dug it. Unreborn Again I thought was a great track. The Evil Has Landed.
Just to clarify, the second half is starting with Head Like a Haunted House or starting with Unreborn Again?
I would say starting with Unreborn Again. I did like Head with a Haunted House, but I suppose the rock and roll vibe on it, I felt like it was more of a fun track than something that was really kind of standoutish.
See, Head Like a Haunted House was my favourite track on the album. I really loved the bass line in it for a start. Is the best on the album. It's really fun and catchy, and the guitar tones actually work, I think, in the track. It's a really good little punchy, energetic song to cut in the sort of middle of the album.
And some of the made-up words are quite fun as well. Xanadu's and Xanadon't. With sublime. So yeah, I did like that track, but I just wouldn't have called it a standout.
Well, going back to your favourite track, Villains of Circumstance, my thought on the song is it has one of the best choruses I've heard in such a long time. But I just thought that the verses were really watery. Makes sense.
Oh, I didn't think that. I suppose for me it was Josh's vocals that really pulled them through, and I liked the lyrics as well. You know, being about the anxiety of a long distance relationship, I thought he pulled out pretty well. You know, we're hostages of geography. I thought was a great lyric. Some of the great ones as well. So I just liked it a lot.
Well, are there any tracks that you didn't like?
The only one I would say I didn't like was Feet Don't Fail Me. The opening track, I thought opened it, you know, the intro is far too long, nothing interesting about it, a bit too squelchy. But even then, on the first half of the album, all of the songs had perhaps something I could, you know, really quite like. I just didn't think it was executed perfectly across the board. Like, I already said I wasn't all that keen on The Way You Used to Do, but even then, Josh's vocals are great on that song.
I like the way that they switch up the guitar riffs in each verse as well to keep it fresh. I think it goes on a bit too long, and also screw that guitar tone. It's horrible. Pretty
much. And then on Domesticated Animals, you've got the use of 7-time, which I'm obliged to like because 7-time is the best time. But
that was my least favourite track on the album.
Yeah, they didn't really offer much else other than
I literally
other than that.
I thought that the only thing it had going for it was that it was done in 7-time. And besides that, it was really repetitive, dull, boring, and catchy in a really annoying way. I've still got it stuck in my head, and I just want it to leave.
Well, I just like 7-time. I want to be on record saying that. So,
what's the best 7-time song?
The best 7-time song? Oh. Well, I would say it switches between 7-time and common time, but So We Wrote by the Pineapple Thief. I love that track so much. So yeah.
I don't know any good examples of 7-time. I know it's used quite a lot in folk music. I couldn't give you any specific examples. Well, I think that for the most part, the album is a bit forgettable. I'd much rather just go back and listen to their other works.
Well, I really liked the second half, so I'd call the first half kind of average, but the second half really good.
So I thought that Unreborn Again and Hideaway weren't bad, just forgettable. And then The Evil Has Landed had some really great riffs on it, and it was better than the previous two tracks I just mentioned, but it was too long and also kind of forgettable.
What I quite liked about Unreborn Again and The Evil Has The Evil Has Landed is that you're getting a bit of a theme about drug use and trying to live your life to the fullest, but not being able to quite get there. I thought the theme throughout those tracks is executed quite well.
Well, I don't think it's the worst thing they could have done for their 7th album. I think they've had a pretty consistent discography.
Yeah.
So I'm not worried about them yet.
Yeah. One point I'd like to make is that this is definitely a Queens of the Stone Age album. I kind of feel like they don't change up their sound an awful lot.
Yeah,
So
it's not very innovative.
Yeah, I think if you like Queens of the Stone Age, you will like this album, basically. I mean, I liked it as well, so yeah, that's that. I'd give it a 7 out of 10.
I'd give it a 6.
Okay, then.
I just wish it had been a bit better execution-wise.
Yeah, and definitely a few things to fix in the first half, I think. Could have made it, that much better.
Well, we're going to talk about something completely different now. We're going to talk about mice. Oh, sorry, wrong notes.
We could talk about mice if you like.
I think mice are good. What do you think?
I mean, they're cuter than rats, but they still eat away at, tables and things.
They do. I think domesticated mice, good.
Oh, yeah, domesticated mice are nice, but they still like to nibble on people's fingers. I mean, everyone's got their quirks, so...
Yeah. Well, let's go on to the next album.
Yes, next album, we have the new Brockhampton album. They're going to be the first group that we have reviewed twice in a year, I think.
They will. Maybe even 3 times the way it's going.
Yeah.
They've said that they've said Saturation 3 is going to come out soon.
Yeah, it's rather remarkable. They are pumping out these babies.
They are living up to the title Saturation, really, aren't they?
Pretty much. But the Saturation we are going to be talking about today is Saturation 2, which dropped on the 25th of August. I think my overall opinion on this album is that it's good. There are a lot of tight verses, some interesting instrumentation, and a few really impactful moments. But I kind of think on this album, more so than the first album, it kind of reveals a few of the shortcomings of writing in a hip-hop collective.
How so?
Well, I think it comes across that in some of the songs, there's a bit of a lack of focus in the songwriting, as in... they'll each go across their verses, but on different topics in a way that when I come away from the song, I don't really feel like it's left that much of an impact on me, or nothing clear has really come out of it. So, to give an example, what I think is the weakest executed track on the album is Junkie, which starts with quite possibly one of the most striking verses in the entire album. Kevin Abstract's verse ending with "Why you always rap about being gay, because not enough people rap and be gay." The whole verse is about homophobia in that community, and it's a very striking and poignant point on the album. And I kind of feel like that song should have ended with that, if that's going to be the most striking message on the album, because after that you kind of get a bit of a chorus, and then you go back to everyone else talking about their usual talking points. Amir Van's talking about drugs, and then you've got Merlin talking about strained family relationships, Matt's verse about respecting women. It kind of flits between different topics without any cohesion, and then the really twangy backing by that point has got really annoying at the end. And at the end of that song, I just feel like it was a waste of a track.
That's one of my favourites on the album.
Okay.
I personally see it's impossible to talk about this album without making comparisons to Saturation 1, because they're laid out in a similar way. In Junkie, I think very clearly mirrors Bump, which was your least favourite from their first album as
Here
well.
We go, yeah.
I mean, it's another one where they're rapping about their inner demons, the way I see it. And I think that I didn't find the beat got annoying personally, and I think that each of the members really brought really distinctive flows to each of their verses, which made them all very easy to digest on their own. And I loved how chaotic it was in the chorus, and it's one of the ones that I just found was more memorable on the album.
It's definitely memorable, I would say, but it just didn't gel with me. And I kind of felt like there were a few tracks like that on the album. I think Swamp and Sweet as well kind of fell into that trap. Other tracks did, but it didn't really feel so glaring. So I don't think it's a huge issue with the album. But I do think that I don't know.
I really like Sweet as well. Well,
okay.
My main thing I took away from this album is that while I thought that Saturation 1 was good, but it definitely had its highs and lows, I think Saturation 2 is a lot more consistent, but doesn't have as many highs. Also doesn't
Yeah.
have as many lows, but it feels a bit more digestible, I guess.
I think I would agree with you. Because there isn't a song like Milk on this album,
No,
which,
Milk is my favourite track of the year so far.
which I adored, so...
But I mean, the closest to that I think they got was possibly Sunny, maybe Gamba, or some sort of combination of the two, and I don't think either of those songs were anywhere near as good.
Yeah. Just a note about Sunny. I really liked the composition of that song. Just the guitar, the sliding guitars, the synths, the Glock it's such a nice orchestration. But I found like the production was just too loud on a track that was supposed to be so sweet. I don't know if you felt that at all, but for me,
I didn't really notice it, but thinking back, I can understand how that could have come across.
Yeah, but still, it was still a very nice.
I like the juxtaposition
yeah.
in it of Teeth and Fight from earlier on in the album. It is a lot more of a laid back track, even though they still talk about pressing matters in it.
Yeah.
But it's definitely what the album needed just before it closes out.
Yeah, just a note about Teeth and Fight. Those were my two favourite tracks on the album. And I think that's because I felt like their messages were a lot more focused on those tracks. I mean, Teeth, of course, was just one verse anyway, and I mean, it had such great instrumentation, these kind of a cappella gospel vocals, and then introducing a bit of that sinister keyboard. It felt quite intense, even though it was quite a short track. And Zamir Van's solo verse, just about disenfranchisement of being an underprivileged person in a privileged school, it felt really impactful just on that one track, and he got everything he needed to say just in that one verse, and it left me with quite a strong impression, which is kind of what I wanted more from some of the other tracks.
I think one of my least favourite tracks on Saturation 1 was Tupac, which is a very similar style, and I feel like both Teeth and Fight are much better than Tupac was. Like I said, I think the album is more consistent, where the tracks which were less good that are being mirrored on this album have been brought up at the expense of some of the better tracks being brought down. One of my favourite verses in the entire album is on Fight, which is, I was born with a target and it stuck to my skin, and I learned in social studies I was one of them men who were locked in the chains but not locked in the pen, but I'm bigger than that, I'm the beginning and end. I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, I really liked Fight as well. I kind of felt like there was a bit of a sonic theme as well with this album. It kind of came through with Fight. There's the kind of Arabic sounding instrumentation that we heard on Gummy and Fight, and there's another track as well. I'm just struggling to remember which one it is that has that instrumentation as well. And it's nice to have that sonic theme as well in this album. It kind of gives it a bit more cohesion.
Well, you've already said your highlights, so I'll say some of mine.
Yep.
First of all, Gummy, which we talked about.
Oh yeah, it's a great track.
I think is really, really strong. Absolutely great opening track. And the chorus is one of the catchiest things I've heard all year. Still got it stuck in my head. Then Junkie I've already talked about. In contrast to you, I really liked Sweet. I thought it was really catchy and fun. The flows are great. The beats are excellent. And I really liked the conversation in the first verse between Matt Champion and himself. I thought it was hilarious. And then the vocal delivery from Merlin saying, "Don't call me stupid, that ain't the way my name pronounced," in a very, very exaggerated kind of stupid way.
Yeah.
I thought it was a really funny track.
Yeah, I don't know, Sweet it just grated on me. I thought the motif was a bit meh in the instrumentation, and nothing really stood out to me too much, so.
One final track that I really liked is Summer.
Yeah.
Which I thought was better. Like, I was a bit disappointed with Waste from the last album being the final track. I thought it was not as strong a end to the album as I would have liked, whereas I much prefer Summer. I think Bareface's performance he's really trying to channel Frank Ocean. I think, and the guitar solo in it is absolutely perfect for the
it's
tone.
lovely, yeah. Because Saturation 1 did end in a similar way, but I think it's done better here on Saturation 2, just because I think Sunny, it has that kind of bittersweet sound to it, so it kind of transitions quite well into a song like Summer, which is a singy song, not a rappy song. So, yeah.
I think that it's a bit of a shame that it's more of a consistent album in a way, because, I mean, for a start, there are fewer abrasive opening tracks, like on the first album. You start off with some really aggressive tracks at the beginning of Saturation 1, and because there's less variety on this album in that sense, there's less chance for sort of possible failure or success or experimentation that I kind of miss.
Yeah.
But I think overall, it's hard to put them down for sounding similar to their first album. There being very obvious comparisons between the two. When you get a deeper understanding of each member on this album, they're still doing the really unique sound that They
Yeah.
started on saturation 1, so I don't really have a
Yeah,
problem with
and
that.
there are definitely some kind of new sounds as well on this album. You know, again with the more Arabic instrumentation, and then a couple of other and a few more jazzy touches as well. Another highlight for me was Tokyo. I loved the bass and saxophone combination in that track. It just sounded lovely.
As far as least favourite tracks on the album go for me, Jello, it's not a bad track per se, and the backing is interesting, but the
Yeah.
flow and the pitch shift together make it really hard for me to connect with the lyrics and how much is going on. I just came away from that track with nothing. And then Gamba, I don't want to say it's the least favourite track so much, because I think it's got one of the best beats or vibes on the album.
Yeah.
I just think the lyrics are really lazy and the auto-tune gets quite painful.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with you. One kind of final point I want to make about the album is that I'll throw the cat among the pigeons. I think Don McLennan is the best member.
I'd be inclined to agree with you, yeah.
It's just on so many tracks where he's featuring, his verse is my favourite. On Gummy, Queer, Tokyo, Chick. When his verse comes on, I'm happy. I'm happy that I'm listening to it.
I'm also quite a big fan of Merlin, just because I think that it's always quite interesting whenever he comes on. I don't mind whether his verse pulls it off or not. I just think that he's quite interesting to listen to, you know?
Yeah, oh definitely. I mean, they're all strong. They're all strong. I'm not putting anyone down. I'm just just being opinionated.
So I would say light 8.
I'd give it a good 7.
Well, that was quite an experience talking about another album by a band in the same year. We've only been doing this a few months.
I know, and you know, it might be a third time it'll be a...
I remember the time that there was that big theory that Kendrick Lamar was going to release a second album that was going to pair with Damn 2 days after Damn came out.
And I was just like, no,
and
it's not happening.
It was going to be called Nation, and people had already worked out what the track list was, and then it didn't happen.
I was telling people, take off your tinfoil hats. It didn't happen with Radiohead's The King of Limbs. It's not happening with Damn.
Then again, did we want it to happen with King of Limbs?
I wanted them to remaster the album so it was actually good. So, no, it's still a good album. I take that back. It's still a good album, but still, it had a few cobwebs on it that needed a bit. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about drugs, or rather, the war on them.
My opinion is legalize all of the substances.
Every single one.
Every single one.
Okay. I think weed, maybe. Tax it in the right way. That could work.
Oh, you're far too reasonable, Nick.
Well, the war on drugs, with their new album, A Deeper Understanding. This is a 6-piece band formed in 2005, and very much the front man and face of the project is Adam Granduciel. This album is 10 tracks long, 67 minutes, so it's a long album. I have like 3 albums already by The War on Drugs, which I've never given that much time to. I listened to Red Eyes from Lost in the Dream quite a few times because I think that's a great track, but I've never really given them that much attention, which is weird because I really like that track. So it was nice to listen to the single they released a few months ago now, Thinking of a Place.
Yeah.
It was really nice to listen to Thinking of a Place when it was released as an album and really connect with it. I really liked that track when it came out, and it got me really excited for the album, which is now out. So I think it's quite interesting because The War on Drugs are very clearly influenced by 80s rock.
Oh, definitely.
They have like so many touchstones there, but at the same time I think they sound really original. They've really mastered this sound that they're coming out with nowadays that no one else I think is doing in quite the same way.
Yeah, they have a very comforting sound. That's how I describe it.
Yeah.
It's kind of a very classic guitar, keyboard, drums, bass, almost like your standard rock outfit. But the textures they make they just sound very rich, very full. And I'm not sure if safe is the right word, but everything is very consonant about their music. Everything fits together in a way that it is very comforting, makes you feel good.
But in a way, I think this album is a bit safe.
Yeah.
Because it is very similar to their last album, but with added guitar solos, and just generally everything's a bit bigger. They haven't done anything really innovative, but at the same time, I don't really care because I just love the sound that they produce. They're able to create such rich soundscapes with so much detail in them. It's always a pleasure to listen to.
Yeah. Well, what I will say now is that when I first listened to the album, I've gone into this album not really having listened to any of their previous material. But I went into this album, and when I first listened to it while I was playing Pokemon, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was fantastic. But as I kept on listening to it and listened to it again, I kind of realised that it's basically the same song over and over again.
I wouldn't agree with that, but I will agree that the more I've listened to it, the more it's gone down in my estimations. Like I said, I really enjoyed it the first time I listened to it, but not so much this time.
Yeah,
I think that's because after Thinking of a Place, I'm completely satisfied with the amount I've listened to, and then the last three tracks, I just don't. They're not bad. I just don't really need them.
I got the exact same thing because Thinking of a Place was one of my two highlights that I've put in a nice bold green. Liked this track a lot. I liked how it shifted between more acoustic and synthetic sections because it is a long track. It's 12 or so minutes, something like that. But it just flows so naturally, and the harmonica in it as well just blends into the texture in a lovely way. It's a great track. And then after that, I mean, it just feels like more of the same, but it's not really necessary.
I think any of those tracks are pretty good on their own. I think they all justify their length when listening to them on their own. But it is a long album, and with each track being quite long, like I'm not trying to say it's fatigue, because I mean I felt so much fatigue with Katy Perry I had to turn it off. I didn't want to turn this album off. I just didn't need any more.
Yeah, I think because their sound is so nostalgic and so comforting that it's very easy to just put this on and be satisfied with listening to it. I think for me it's when I'm actually kind of paying attention to it, making notes on each track, trying to find out what makes the album tick, that I realise that there's perhaps not as much to it as I'd like there to be. But you know, just listening to it is fine as just put something on in the background while you do a bit of housework or, you know, whatever else you want to do. I
think there's a good variety of energy throughout the album, so I don't think that the tracks all sound the same like you do. I think that they're really all really colourful, and there's a great contrast between the grittiness of the rock influence and then the dreamy synths that surround them. And I think the vocals are always very fitting in the same way that Queens of the Stone Age vocals always fit. I think the War on Drugs vocals always fit, even if the lyrics aren't always great.
That's something else I did note. The lyrics are decidedly average.
They're very obvious lyrics.
Yeah. The whole album is basically about longing for love, and it's pretty much in every single track. Like that, I wouldn't say they're bad lyrics at all.
I like the dichotomy of the lyrics and the sound, the very personal lyrics about heartbreak and self-doubt meeting the very expansive sound, I think works.
Yeah, I think it works, but for me, the lyrics became a point of something I'm not really going to pay that much attention to as I go through the album.
I much prefer listening to his voice than what he's saying.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Well, should we talk about some highlights and lowlights?
Yeah, certainly.
Your highlight, other than Thinking of a Place,
was Pain.
Oh,
Pain. And that's basically because of the guitar solos.
The guitar solos.
That's basically the reason why. They were very emotive and they made me feel, which is not easy to do.
I think Pain's one of the best tracks of the year, or at least one of the most beautiful. The guitar solos are absolutely pitch perfect, and it's a pleasure to listen to. I'd also say Holding On, while the most radio-friendly song, I love the descending melody at the end of each verse and how uplifting it is and how catchy it is. Yeah. I think if they had to have a radio song, it would be that one, but I think it's a really bold move of them to release Thinking of a Place as their first single. Also a very good move.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the best songs on the album, so I say good on them.
Yeah.
Good on them.
Strangest Thing, I love because it's one great big crescendo throughout, and the ending of it with that real sunburst of guitar it just makes me so happy to listen to. One of the best guitar entrances I've heard for a while. And then Nothing to Find isn't so much a favourite track, but I have to give a shout out to that harmonica in it.
Oh, definitely. Love harmonica.
It does have a fade out.
So that gets minus points from Nick.
It doesn't I don't always hate fade outs. I think sometimes they're used quite well, but a lot of the time they do just seem to me like a way of ending a song without having to put too much effort into it.
They don't bother me too much. It's only I just don't think it. I agree with your reasoning, and sometimes I do think that, but I just don't think it bothers me as much as it does you.
As far as worst tracks go, Knocked Down, I didn't. I mean, I guess it's necessary for pacing, but it felt a bit schmaltzy, and the lyrics were probably the worst on the album. I think it should either have been shorter, or it should have gone on longer and built up a bit more, and as it was, it just sort of meandered a bit.
I don't know. I wouldn't really say there were any tracks I didn't like, but it's just when I came onto tracks like In Chains, it's basically the same as Up All Night. This is me going back to the point that so many of the songs sound the same, and Nothing to Find basically sounded the exact same as Holding On, but with a bit more harmonica. So those tracks didn't really do anything for me because of that, I think.
Well, I don't have much else to say about the album. I really enjoy listening to it.
Yeah.
I just don't think it's as good as it was when I first listened to it. I think one of the reasons that I can listen to it throughout and not get fatigued is because the mixing is done so well. Everything is so crisp and wrapped up in a nice little blanket of reverb. And because it's mixed so well, it's never really undone by its cliches that it follows. You completely expect them to keep falling on their sword after each time that they pull something from the 80s, and it never really happens, I don't think.
Yeah, I would by and large agree with you. I still really enjoy listening to this album just as something to hear. So I definitely like this album. I just, if I'm putting my critical glasses on, then I don't have a huge amount of positives to say about it. I'd give it a 6 out of 10 just because it's still a joy to listen to.
I think I'd give it a strong 7 or a light 8 personally. I think something else I love about it is it's never overdone. I mean, it's a very grand sound, very sort of like surrounds you, but for example, like the drums are always really reserved on it. They're never that loud, which allows other parts to really shine. I think listening throughout it, I tried to count how many drum fills there were, and there really weren't that many.
It's funny you say that because the drums do play a prominent part in a lot of the more upbeat tracks, just because the harmonic rhythms tend to be quite slow with the guitars and keyboards and the changes of chords. So it's an interesting sound, but I do think the drums play a kind of prominent part in the more upbeat tracks.
You know who else did try to do really big surrounding sounds this year? LCD Soundsystem.
Oh yes, they definitely did.
Well, LCD Soundsystem were this really quite inspirational indie-tronic / disco, I guess, band, which have had various members since they began, though James Murphy is very much their frontman and leader. And they broke up in 2011 after 3 critically acclaimed albums, and they had this really big farewell. And then they got back together, 5 years later? And they came back together for, I'm not sure what reason, but they released this album, and after such a big farewell, I just really don't see why.
To be honest, I don't care all that much. I think that's because I've never really explored their sound before. They've never been a band that has really struck me, I suppose. So
it's another long album, 69 minutes, 10 tracks, just like the last one. And I was just really underwhelmed by this album. I think it's kind of boring throughout. There aren't really any strong emotional moments to break the monotony. Every song is too long. Every single song is too long on the album.
Yeah.
And the mixing of it is really grey. Like, I was talking about how the War on Drugs had this really colourful sound. This is just grey.
I agree that some of the tracks are too long, but I think I wasn't sure if that's just because, you know, their sound is based on repetition anyway, and building up around those repetitions. So I didn't really find too many of the tracks too long.
On their previous albums, they write quite a lot of long songs, but I've just never really noticed them to be long, except on this album. The long intros and outros seem to be tacked on without any real justification to me.
Yeah, I'm starting to think that maybe I do agree with you, because I actually quite liked the first half of the album, but towards the second half, maybe just like the overly repetitive nature of their music was grating on me too much, and I just didn't like the tracks as much in the second half. Because when I got to the final track, which was my least favourite track,
Same.
Black Screen,
which is a shame because it's a eulogy to David Bowie.
Like the first of the song, you know, there are there's some quite sweet lyrics in there, but I found just the entire second half of the song, I think it's another kind of 12 minute, something like that track, completely unnecessary.
That's the second David Bowie eulogy song this year that we haven't liked.
What was the first one?
Electric Blue by Arcade Fire.
Yeah. Oh dear, his legacy. What would he have said about
What
it?
I will say is that the songs that I thought were good, I did think were solidly good songs.
Yeah.
I just think the album's not ordered very well at all.
Hmm.
It's another one where after a certain point, I'm just like, okay, I'm done now. Don't really care for the rest of the tracks. And that comes after American Dream. I think to do the album better, put Emotional Haircut earlier on the album to
Yeah.
put in a burst of energy between some of the more slow burner songs, and then remove Black Screen. And if you really want to do your eulogy for David Bowie in such a way, just release it as a one-off single.
Yeah.
I think it really doesn't work very well on the album at all. It should have ended with American Dream for me.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with you. But even then, I wasn't a fan of American Dream.
That's one of my
to be honest.
one of my favourites from the album.
I found
but
it just a little bit too cheesy for me.
I think
personally.
well, actually, I get what you mean now. I'm finding it hard to say positives about this album
Okay,
because
I'll
I'm just so disappointed.
I'll say some positives. I had no expectations of this album going in, and the first half of the album, I quite liked. Oh Baby, I wasn't too keen on.
I think you're going to have disliked all the songs that I kind of liked.
But basically the stretch from Other Voices to How Do You Sleep, I quite like.
Yeah, that was my least favourite part of the album. Just those tracks.
Of course.
How Do You Sleep, especially. I just
I suppose one of the reasons I liked it is because the vocal inflections on some of those tracks really reminded me of one of my favourite albums of the decade, Hope for a Morning by Mice on Stilts. So I
You've
don't.
never mentioned this album before, so I'm going to say that you've made it up. We were talking about Mice earlier.
I completely made that band up. Don't Google it and find their music on Bandcamp and listen to all of their stuff because they don't exist. But yeah, I liked some of the darker undertones to some of those songs, probably because I like dark undertones.
I thought that Distant Voices was a really long, boring disco track with lyrics that barely resonate with the music and an uninspired vocal performance. I used to and Change Your Mind aren't awful, but they're just not really exciting in any way. And How Do You Sleep is so long, so dull. Vocal performance on it sucks. The lyrics do not fit with the tone. And these sound so whiny singing on it. It's just really obnoxious and I hate it.
Okay, to be honest, I don't really have much in the way of a counter point or counter argument. I just quite enjoyed the darker moments.
See, I liked Call the Police. I thought it was the first actually exciting track on the album, and I get it does go on a bit long, like I've said, but I think it builds pretty well, and it's the first really fitting vocal performance on the album.
See, I thought the instrumentation on that one was just really bland. I just didn't get it, and I thought the lyrics didn't really leave me with any
the lyrics
impact.
are really unfocused.
I mean, it kind of feels like it's trying to be another political song, but I didn't really, it didn't really give anything to me, so...
And I thought American Dream was a good ballad, and I really liked the synth tones on it, and I thought that Murphy's performance was probably best on the record, as well as it having the best lyrics on the album, which, I mean, due to the crappy mixing, you can't really hear them at parts, which is a shame. I think James Murphy really likes to sing about crisis of age.
Yeah, I did get that theme on this album. Yeah.
Well, I found this album to be quite a big disappointment. I think the songs that I liked were pretty good, and the songs that I didn't like were really bad. So
Yeah.
I'd say light 5.
I'm definitely more positive about this album than you are. The tracks I liked. The tracks I didn't like, I thought were passable. So I'm kind of thinking a strong 6 again, really. I kind of find this album very comparable to The War on Drugs. Just in terms of kind of like, the tracks are quite long and they develop on kind of building over the same chord progressions, that kind of thing. But they do have different weaknesses, I think. I think this one has more highlights for me, but then just a second half that just lost me. Just lost me.
I'm really excited for the next band. I've
Yes.
been excited for this next band since their last album came out.
Yeah, what was it, 2013? I think it was.
Might have been. Was it really that long ago?
It might have been 14. I'm just trying to... No, it was 2013 because that's when I started my new job when it came out around that time. So,
Right.
yes. So...
I remember getting a text from my friend Charlie saying, "Trouble has found me."
And if you haven't figured out what band it is yet, then shame on you because it is one of my favourite bands. The National with their new album that came out on the 8th of September, Sleep Well Beast. So yeah, it's no secret that I adore this band.
Same. 12 songs and 57 minutes. It's actually one of the shorter albums we're talking about this time.
Yeah, not that their albums ever seem particularly long, ever.
No.
But one thing I will say about this album is that for the first time, perhaps ever, I thought Matt Berninger's lyrics are possibly the weakest point on the album for the first time ever.
Nah.
You don't think so?
Nah. Except maybe Turtleneck. I thought Turtleneck was... we'll come back to Turtleneck, because I think that deserves its own little section to talk about.
Yeah.
I've always loved his lyrics, and I really love them again here.
Yeah.
I think... it's their 7th album, and it's their 5th, I'm going to say it, triumph in a row.
I would say Sad Songs for Dirty Lovers is also a triumph. But then again, I know I'm in the minority for that for that opinion, but what can I do?
They've definitely reached that point in their career where they're sort of respected, I'm going to say for music, elder gentlemen, and because they're respected so much, I think fans just sort of trust them to just do what they like, and they're allowed to do what they like with their music.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
And I think that could have gone really, really badly on this album. Like they're all in their 40s, and you can just think about how much over-analysis of like existentialism there could have been on this album, and I'm glad there isn't.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely a progression from Trouble Will Find Me.
Definitely.
But it has lots of callbacks to previous albums and songs. I'm glad they're not completely forgetting their roots as they move on. I mean, in terms of lyrics, there's references to Jester Valentine on Day I Die, and then Fake Empire sort of twins with Walk It Back.
Oh yeah, I definitely like this album as progression, because I did find Trouble Will Find Me a little bit too dreary overall as an album. So having this album just be a bit more vibrant, I really enjoyed both in terms of some of the songs being a bit more upbeat, but also the instrumentation. I really like some of the more vibrant electronics that are going through this album. That you just kind of, this album feels like their first really kind of bouncy album.
At least since Alligator, I think.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
See, for me, both Alligator and Boxer are strong 9s, and then High Violet is a light 9, and then I think Trouble Will Find Me is a light 8. So, while it is my least favourite, I still like it a lot.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
So, I'm glad that they're sort of progressing from that sound, and they haven't chosen to go down that route completely again.
Yeah, because I think if they released anything a bit darker than Trouble Will Find Me, then they as much as I like darkness, and I like it a lot, it would have been very difficult to listen to. So yeah, I'm very pleased with the direction.
This is another album where the production is just so incredibly spacious that it allows it to breathe if it really needs to.
Yeah.
And I think while most of the tracks are very intimate, it just allows for that little bit of room that they really need for if they choose to do so.
Yeah, because a lot of the textures, they seem quite... I've written down they seem quite light and frothy because they're never too crowded.
Oh yeah.
It's never too crowded.
There's
You can hear everything.
So much detail in every song. Like Nobody Else Will Be There is a really good example of it being led by this main piano focal melody, but then in the background it's got these electronic whirs all over the place which never get in the way and just really add to the texture of the song. It's lovely.
Yeah, and I'd also point to the closing track, Sleep Well Beast, for just having just light touches of instrumentation all over the place that never gets boring to listen to. You're hearing these weird guitar licks and just gorgeous ambience as well. It sounds so crisp and clean and lovely to listen to.
Well, it's a common theme on the album, really subtle textures which just add to every song.
Yeah.
As far as not so subtle stuff goes, though, the drums on the album, as per every single National album ever, are absolutely excellent.
Yeah. I would say ever since Boxer. I think Boxer is the first time the drums really came to the absolute forefront, and then ever since, the drums have been fantastic.
Especially on tracks like Day I Die, Guilty Party, Empire Line.
Oh, definitely. All fantastic drumming.
You know what this album does well that LCD Soundsystem doesn't do well?
A lot of things.
Okay, a lot of things. But I think the album ordering on this is just completely spot on. And it's the perfect length. It's a complete breeze to listen to.
Oh,
And I
definitely.
really, really respect that. They have sort of gone down the classic road of calm song, upbeat song, calm song, upbeat song, with a few variations throughout. But I think that works really well.
It works well, but I would kind of counter that point with the overall sound on this album is still quite languid.
Oh
So
yeah,
it's not kind of like a peak and trough of momentum. It kind of like goes a little bit up, a little bit down, a little bit, and then
Yeah.
maybe a little bit more up, and then
Yeah.
a little bit down. It kind of
you were
feels a
you were
lot.
thinking of Turtleneck, weren't you?
Yeah, that was the that was the peak in the wavelength. But yeah,
Should we talk about Turtleneck now that we've mentioned it?
yes.
What did you think of it?
I thought?
Because I've seen a
It's-
lot of people say it's the worst track they've ever done, and other people say they really enjoyed it. And I want to know what your opinion
Okay,
is.
so I'm neither of those two. So the lyrics are a bit of a mess.
Yeah, the lyrics on that song are the worst on the album.
So-
I will admit.
I'm not. I still wouldn't call them necessarily bad lyrics. You're not really getting cliches or
No.
anything that's going to make you wince, but they're a little bit all over the place.
I think that's sort of the point.
It's sort
I
of
think
the
they
point.
are meant to sort of reflect the chaotic world we live in today.
Yeah, I think so. I think it just stands out as perhaps a teensy bit jarring, just because in each song, Matt's usually very much on subject, on a point that's getting a message across, and then so a song like Turtleneck, I think for a lot of fans, it might throw them a bit.
I know I said earlier that they're sort of respected enough to do what they want and the fans will trust them, but on this track, I think they went a little too far, maybe. Though, that being said, I think the composition of it is really good.
The composition is
It's-
fine.
For something that's
yeah.
completely unlike anything we've heard from them before,
I-
it's undeniably catchy, and the guitar fills in it are so erratic.
Yeah, for me, this song kind of reminded me a bit of Available from Sad Songs from Dirty Lovers, but it kind of seems like they're very much throwing back to a lot of their earlier sounds, because I would actually say this album sounds most similar to Sad Songs than any of their other albums, just from kind of the variety in sounds, the bursts of energy, and a lot of the more calm languidity that kind of runs through this album. It did remind me a lot of Sad Songs, and I think Turtleneck just kind of confirms that, really.
I like the line in it, like the water, check for lead. I love the references to the Flint and boiling water and Republicans, and just in
Yeah.
just in six words, there's quite a lot of meaning held in that.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot in that song to unpick. I haven't unpicked everything in it. Sometimes I just like to let the song pass me by as just that burst of
So-
energy.
My favourite line on the entire album, actually I've got two, I'm going to be cheeky. One of them's from Born to Beg, tea kettle love, I'd do anything. I just love the idea of having a love that's like a kettle in the way that you'd drop everything to go and
Yeah.
get to it, just in 5 words. And then just generally the entire chorus from Guilty Party. I say your name, I say I'm sorry, I know it's not working, I'm no holiday, it's nobody's fault, no guilty party, we just got nothing left to say. Oh, so heartbreaking.
It's very sweet. See, I didn't really pick out any lyrics that really stood out to me, because one of the things I do like about Matt's lyrics is because they so often kind of reach inside my gut and just give it a good twist around, a good few punches before leaving. But that never really happened to me on this album, which I think I do miss a little bit. But
I had that exact feeling for most of the songs, so...
yeah, I do miss that a bit.
One,
But the lyrics are still pretty fine throughout. There's nothing wrong with them at all.
like I said, I really like the references back to various other songs, like on Day I Die, it's got the line, I get a little punchy with the vodka, just like my great uncle Valentine Jester did, which
Yeah.
finally confirms who he is. But he had to deal with those people like you who made no goddamn common sense. I'd rather walk all the way home right now than to spend one more second in this place. I'm exactly like you, Valentine. Just come outside and leave with me. I think his delivery of those lines is so emotional. It's really a gut punch for me. I think it's one of my favourite moments on the entire album, from one of my
Yeah.
favourite songs.
It's one of my highlights as well. Another
Sorry, I was just going to say, should we actually talk about highlights?
Yes, we shall. The System Only Dreams in Total Darkness. When we first reviewed it, I did have a few reservations that the lyrics didn't jump out to me. They still don't, but the instrumentation is fantastic.
That guitar solo.
It's the guitar licks in it
Yeah.
add so much to the texture of the song, and then the solo, first national guitar solo as far as I'm aware, is it's great. It's fine, and I really like the composition of the warm synths and
Oh yeah,
just
they works in the bridge especially.
yeah, they're so nice, and the metallic guitars and everything coming together to form this very, very unique sound just works so well on that track. And I think Guilty Party does that as well. The kind of in the climax, the little guitar licks as well just feel so light and airy underneath those warm synths. It just sounds so good. I just love listening to those tracks so much.
I think if I had one problem with the album, it would be on Guilty Party. I think they rely on the chorus a bit too much. And I like that the backing is forever progressing to compensate for that, but I don't know, I just wish that they'd gone a bit further with the lyrics personally.
That's fair enough, but I still loved the track. And then most of the tracks in the second half I thought were very strong.
Oh,
I'll
yeah.
Still Destroy You.
Oh, I'll Still Destroy You is my favourite track on the
It's-
entire album.
It's a great song.
It's so easy to
Yeah.
it's so easy to set off the molecules and the caplets.
Yeah,
That's such a brilliant line.
yeah. And I just like how it's so relaxing as well. It has those kind of upbeat elements to some of the drumming and some of the synth patterns, but it's so relaxing as well. It's a bit like listening to Bjork, really, but it's I just love listening to it. And then the last two tracks as well, I really liked.
Dark Side of the Gym.
Dark Side of the Gym.
I love the chorus to that. It's kind of creepy in a way. I'm going to keep you in love with me
Yeah.
for a little while, but at the same time, it's really quite warm in his delivery.
Yeah.
It works really well.
It works really well because sometimes I think the first time I listened to it, I wasn't so sure. I was thinking it's a bit of a standard love song, but just kind of listening to it again and then for a third time, I'm just like, I really enjoy this. It's so pleasant.
I'm going to say some of my favourite tracks, and then I'd like to talk about the final track for a minute.
Kidoki.
So Nobody Else Will Be There, I think, is a fantastic start to the album, and the vocal melody on it is absolutely mesmerising. Day I Die we've already talked about. I think it's a wonderful faster track that continues the tone while increasing the energy, like you mentioned
Yeah.
before. And another fantastic vocal performance. Born to Beg as well, I think, is a really sweet song, and I like the fact that a lot of the songs were co-written by Matt Berninger's wife Karen.
Yeah.
So it's really sweet in that sense. Then I'll Still Destroy You, I've said, is my favourite track on the album. I think Karen at the Liquor Store is pretty heartbreaking, and has some of the best lyrics on the album. Then Sleep Well Beast is also a track that I think is a real standout.
Yeah.
Possibly one of my favourite, I've tied with I'll Still Destroy You for my favourite.
Yeah.
It's another one that's unlike anything they've ever really done before, to my knowledge. I think this is really superb, abstract, slow burner.
Yeah, it's abstract. It's kind of almost wandering into ambient philosophy in its execution, and they just do it really well.
Yeah. It references back to the first track as well, which I really like, with lines about gin and the stairway. And I like this is a cyclical song with melodies and rhythms looping to allow beautiful sounds and harmonies to be conjured just naturally. And it doesn't go on for too long. It just works so incredibly well. Plus, I love Matt's voice.
Yeah, his voice is fantastic.
Yeah.
It's like it'd definitely be in my top 10 singers of all time.
I don't
but
think
yeah.
I can't think of a single track where he's done a performance that I haven't thought was great. So I would say a light 9.
I'm thinking strong 8 to light 9. I think even though there are a lot of tracks I like on this album, I'm kind of missing that one that I think is absolutely perfect, if you know what I mean. This album doesn't have a Blood Buzz Ohio. It doesn't have a Mr. November. It doesn't have a Mistaken for Strangers, for me personally. But it's still very, very consistently strong.
It doesn't have a Slipping Husband.
Doesn't have a Slipping Husband. Oh, I need to get me one of those. And, but yeah, I'm thinking strong 8 to light 9. It's a fantastic record.
Definitely my record of the month.
Of the month.
Possibly like one of the best of the year. I'd like to make a slight amendment in a second, but I think just wrapping this up,
Yeah.
I think everyone should go and listen to this album.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
So let's just go over what we've talked about so far. Taylor Swift, Your Terrible Stop.
Agreed.
Yeah. Queens of the Stone Age Villains.
Yeah, I liked a little bit more than Nick did.
I still think it's pretty enjoyable. I just hate the mixing so much.
It is a Queens of the Stone Age album, so if you like
if you like your good riffs, there are plenty of good riffs on this album.
You'll like this album.
Yeah, and the vocal performance is always stellar. Saturation 2 by Brockhampton is a bit more consistent than their last album, but in some ways better and in some ways worse.
Yeah.
I would recommend still probably their first album of the two if I had to choose one.
I definitely prefer their first one, but this one isn't far behind at all. It definitely has some highlights. So if you like what you hear about it, go check it out.
The War on Drugs, A Deeper Understanding. If you try and listen to it without thinking about it, I guess.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
got
that's the best
such
approach.
a wonderful sound, and you could
yeah.
probably listen up to Thinking of a Place and then stop, and you'd be satisfied, even if the last 3 tracks are decent.
To be honest, you could listen to a handful of tracks, and then you'd very easily decide if this is for you. I think.
Yeah,
and if it's for you,
if you like your 80s Bruce Springsteen, then
you'll like this.
You'll probably like this. LCD Soundsystem, American Dream. I'm a disappointed man.
I wouldn't say I'm disappointed, but I didn't really have anything riding on this album.
I like how we liked completely opposite tracks, except that we both hated Black Screen.
Yeah, so maybe there's some people out there who'd like all the tracks apart from Black Screen. So I'll leave it up to viewers' discretion, I suppose.
And The National, we just talked about, album of the month.
Yes,
both of us.
Agreed. It's a great album. Go listen to it.
Cool. So the slight amendment I'd like to make. Last time I gave Stephen Wilson's new album a light 9, and I listened to the album again recently and just thought, what was I thinking? Because it's really not that good. It's a good album, but it's not that good. It's not national good. I'd still recommend it, but strong 7 maybe, not a light 9.
So that's the same as me then.
Yeah.
But yeah, still a good album if you want to check out a bit of a modern pop prog, I suppose is what you'd call it.
Yeah. So that comes to the end of another podcast. We've had a bit more time to think about our album. Well, Joe hasn't. Joe has been busy working like a beaver.
Oh, yeah.
So sorry that it's been a week late, but I'm hoping that the extra albums and hate for Taylor Swift will make up for it.
Oh, yeah, it should be. It should have been lots of fun for you all.
Do you want to hear something interesting? We're only 5 minutes over the hour this time,
Ooh.
and we've done 6 items.
Oh, and you know what, with editing it down and whatnot.
Yeah.
Ooh,
So concise.
It's exciting.
So
yeah.
We're at the end of our podcast now. Time for the plugs.
Facebook, Twitter.
Yeah, Facebook and Twitter, F-Sharp, A-Sharp Revisited. You can find this podcast on Podbean or YouTube. We're still working iTunes. Yeah, we're still working on hiring a monkey to do our social media for us.
And people are in my day job. People are actually talking about me taking over social media for the team, and I am. And I have been warning them that I'm terrible at it, but they're not listening. But anyway, yeah, that's just a little something. We'll try to get better at it.
Yeah. We hope you enjoyed listening to our podcast. I've been Nick.
I've been Joe.
And we'll see you in 3 weeks, I think, because I'm going on holiday next week. Might need a bit of extra time.
Well, yeah, we'll figure it out. We won't be too long.
Yeah.
Okay.
See you all soon.
Yeah. Stay
Bye.
awesome. Bye.
F-Sharp. A-Sharp. Revisited.